Hi everyone, my name is Milecia and I'm a developer advocate at iterative.ai where we make open source tools for machine learning projects, which is probably one of the furthest things away from what this workshop is going to be today. So on top of doing developer advocacy and working on machine learning and data science projects, I'm also really into JavaScript, like everything with JavaScript, whether it's web development, IoT, blockchain, VR, cybersecurity, whatever it is. If you can do it with JavaScript, I've probably tried it at least once, and if I haven't, I'm definitely going to. So that's why today I'm doing this workshop on Redwood. And the cool thing about Redwood, I found this when I was just kind of stumbling around online last year, and I pretty much immediately fell in love with this framework and how much stuff it has integrated for you. Like, we'll be talking about the TypeScript in Jamstack today using Redwood, but we'll also see how you can use Redwood to connect to a database using Prisma. We'll do a little bit of component-driven development using Storybook. And if you wanted to, you could even go ahead and add authentication to your Redwood app just by running a few commands in the terminal. And of course, filling in a little bit more information. But Redwood makes it pretty easy to do all of this stuff. But what you see here in the terminal, I'm just going to jump into the workshop part of this, but the project we'll be making today is just a note-taking app, but using TypeScript. So we'll be making the front end using React, we'll make the back end with GraphQL, and we'll handle all of our database queries using Prisma, because that's what comes built in with Redwood. So usually, well, I thought about running the command to initialize this project, but sometimes it can take a few minutes, and I mean more than two. Sometimes it can take a little bit of a while depending on how my computer feels that day. But if you want to follow along, what you will run is yarn create Redwood app. And since we're working with TypeScript, you'll need to add the TypeScript option because Redwood typically gives you a JavaScript project instead of something starting with TypeScript. And then you would give the name of the app that you want to build. So this is the command that you can run to initialize the project exactly like I have it right now. But not gonna run that because, like I said, it can take a while for it to get going. But before we jump in and start making changes, I want to show you what this looks like when we run it with a completely fresh install. So if I switch over to my browser, which I feel capable of today, maybe I shouldn't. Let's see. Yeah, okay, I can switch. So this is what a Redwood app looks like straight out of the box. I don't think it's a surprise that it's not much here, but the point of it is we already have a fully functional full stack app ready to go. And from here, we'll just be basically making this into what we need it to be. So I'm gonna leave the app running right now and just open a new terminal so that we have that clean. But what we're going to start with is actually setting up the database. So again, if you want to follow along, you'll want to take the time and install a Postgres instance maybe. So if I come back over to the browser, you would go to postgresql.org download and pick whichever one of these works for your operating system. So you can download that and get it set up. Postgres is not that bad to work with locally. Like, it's pretty straightforward. But when you do have that set up, we're going to start by updating our schema.prisma file. This is how we connect to our database. This is where we put the models that our tables and columns will have. So this schema.prisma pretty much defines the database for us. In this case, we're going to be using a PostgreSQL database. So make sure you change that from SQLite. And another thing we need to do is over here in our .environment file. So you see here we're getting this database URL reference for the URL. And that comes from this .env file. So we're going to uncomment this line and update this string to match your localhost options. So in my case, it's localhost, and please don't use admin password. Admin, I think it's my password, my credential combination. Oh. Wait a second. I don't feel like I'm typing that in right. So let me just double check. So for our database connection, we need, what does this string look like? And why can't I find it right now? Usually I have the example for this ready to go, but this time, I'm gonna go with admin. Wait, oh, that's what my problem's been. I've been typing things in the wrong place. So that should be your username and password. This is localhost. And if you haven't changed the port that your Postgres instance is running on, it'll probably just be this. And you can give the database a name of typed notes, or at least that's what I'm calling it today. So now that we have this database URL in place, I want to double check this one more time just to make sure that I typed it right, because I don't want y'all following along with like a broken link. So let me check this one more time. Okay, so yep, that looks right. Maybe the username might be Postgres. We'll find out when I go to connect everything. So with this in place, we have our connection string to the database ready, and all we have to do is come back here and define the data models that we want for our database. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that comment and just update this model to get started with. So what's happening here is we have a user. So user is going to be the name of one of our tables, and it's going to have these 3 columns to start with. So we have an ID that's auto-generated, and it's an integer, which you could change this to be a string and maybe a UUID, and then it would default something here. So I'm gonna leave it as an integer for now. But then we have a unique constraint here on the email, and the name field is completely optional. Now we're gonna add another model to hold our note. So every note will have an ID, and we'll go ahead and make this an integer too, and we'll default to auto increment. And we'll give the note a title, which will be a string, and we'll give it the content because we do want to leave something in the note. And if you're wondering why that just jumped around, I just formatted the file, that's all. Just want to keep it clean looking. So we have a note and we have a user. So for our app to work correctly, every user can have multiple notes, but one note will only belong to one user. So the way that we will handle this is by adding a relation between our user table and our note table. So in this case, since every user can have multiple notes, we'll add a note, which will have a type of note. And then I'll add a note ID, which will be an integer because that's what the note ID is. And next we'll add a relation and we'll put a reference to the ID for the notes table here. And we'll add a field. We'll add fields. I think I got this in brackets too early. So fields will be note ID. And let's see. Oh, then we need to add a relationship to the user from the note. So in this case, we'll have an integer, not an int. We'll have a user of type user. And let's see. So gotta make that one optional. All right. So now that we have our model set up, we're ready to run a migration. So to do that with Redwood, we'll run yarn rw, which is short for Redwood, and then we'll have db migrate. Oh, let me change my node version real quick there. That always catches me sometimes. But this is running the migration for our database. And no, I don't remember the command for this, so I'm actually just gonna look that up real quick. That's the fun part about recording a workshop, is usually this stuff just happens and y'all would ask questions and that would give me time to look up things like this, but I'm gonna try to keep it in the feel like we're all here together. So let me look up the command to run this migration real quick. So that, I forgot a word. So yarn rw Prisma, and then it's just migrate. So the okay. So I'm typing this command wrong still, which is fun. Okay, one more word I was missing. So I'll clear the terminal so y'all can see this clearly. It's yarn rw Prisma migrate dev. There we go. This one is going to add these models we've defined to the Postgres instance that we set up at the beginning. And I guess I got the connection string right because it actually connected to the local host for my Postgres instance and made this new typed notes database. And I'll go ahead and name this, initial migration, because we're very unique with file naming in this industry. But anyways, now we have a new migration, and you can see that Prisma translates all of this into SQL for us, and it executes it in the database. So with this in place, we can do a lot of fun things really fast with Redwood. The hardest part, which I personally think is for the best, is taking the time to define your business logic first. So in this case, we took the time to define what our database tables are, what data we expect to have, and we ran our migration. So we know what data we need to work with, whether that's on the front end or the back end. We know exactly what needs to be there. And that is what Redwood takes advantage of. So let's say we wanted to make a way to add new users to this app. Usually that's a whole CRUD build where we have to write out the GraphQL queries to handle the create functionality. We have to make the front end to have this form to get the information from the user, and then we have to do validation, and we have all these things that we need to manually create. But with Redwood, it's a lot easier. So we're going to run yarn rwg for generate, scaffold, and we're going to make user stuff. So I remembered the command this time, but scaffolding is probably my favorite thing that Redwood does. Actually, there's a lot of stuff, but it's definitely high on the list. So when we run this yarn rw generate scaffold user command, what this creates is all of the files we need to handle CRUD operations for a user. We have our GraphQL queries and the mutations. We have the types. We have the front end. There's already a form there. The routes have been updated automatically. Yeah, it does a lot, but I want to show you exactly what it is that's happening. So I'm going to switch over to the browser real quick, and hopefully this is still running. Oh, I might need to restart my server. So I'm going to switch back over to VS Code, go back to the terminal we had everything running in, and just do a restart. Because we've done a lot of actions since we first ran this project. So we've added a new migration to the database. We have a new backend. There's just a lot of things that weren't there when we initially started it, like a home page. So what we're gonna do now is switch back over here to the browser, maybe. That is interesting. Switching to the browser shouldn't be this hard sometimes, but it is. Anyways, so we have our app running, and now you see this 404, which feels weird, but it's actually what we expect, because we never made a home page. But if I go to this user's route, minus that weird thing, what we have is a brand new page that we didn't even write. So if I come over here and click create a new user, there's this whole form. We didn't make this, but I'm gonna go ahead and just create a new user real quick, and we'll associate that with the first note. And something weird is happening over here. So let's take a look at what's happening in VS Code. Let's get back all the way up here. Note. I did not mean date. So let's take a look at the files that were generated real quick. Basically, if we take a look over here in source, you can see these Oh, that's what happened. So this is something that I forget a lot just because I do. But what happened is when we did the scaffold to create all of this functionality for users, we do have a reference to the note type, right? Because users have notes. So what we actually need to do is generate that backend for our notes as well. We can go ahead and, why not? Let's make the CRUD for the note too. So we'll run yarn rw, yarn redwood generate scaffold, and this time we'll do it for the note. But since I am in the new terminal, gotta update that node version, and now we can run this. So this is making the exact same files, but for the note data type. And now we should be good to go. So if I come back over here and look in my terminal, I'm gonna go ahead and restart the server again. It's always fun debugging this stuff live because you want it to be perfect, but code is literally never perfect the first time. So I guess I'm kind of glad to be able to show that, but let's see. That looks like some issues. But maybe it's not. Maybe. Let's find out. So if I switch over to my browser, so back over here, we got the new thing running, refresh. Let's check out users again. All right, we're good to go this time. We were just missing a type. So, whoa, no sweat. So we'll go ahead and create that new user. And yeah. What did I miss this time? So let me switch back over to VS Code. Okay. Duh. You can't reference a note if it doesn't exist yet. So let's make a note. I'm going to switch back over to my browser. And this time, instead of going to the users route, let's go to notes. So of course we don't have any notes yet. It told us that, and that's the reason we can't make this user. So we're going to make a new note and call it works now. Yes, it does. So I'm going to save that note, and yes, it does work now. But what you're seeing here is we save this new note and we have this updated view with this table that will render every note that we create. So if you want to check out the details of the note, you can do that. If you want to edit the note, you can do that and save it. And if you want to delete it, you can do that too. But the thing I really want to point out is that we didn't actually do anything. Like, minus my issues with debugging, Redwood handled all of this CRUD for us. Like, I didn't write the code for this table or this form or any of the backend stuff. It's just there because Redwood is awesome like that. So now, if I come back and try to add this new user, it's gonna be Rhonda. I don't know why, but I like that name right now, so it's gonna be Rhonda. She's gonna have that first note, and boom, we have a new user just like that. So I want you to take note of something really quick. Even though I forgot a few commands and we had to debug some stuff, we have a fully functional full stack Jamstack app in less than 30 minutes. So if you were looking at the docs and handling all of this, or you already knew what your models were going to be, you can have a fully functional full stack app in less than 30 minutes, which blows my mind sometimes. But the point of this is TypeScript, and that's what we're going to get into here. So I'm going to come back over to VS Code. I always have to share my excitement about Redwood first because it just does so many things. Like, we're about to focus on the TypeScript part, but TypeScript was already integrated into the project. We don't have to make the TS config. We don't have to set up which directories it reads from. We just have to know where to put things. That's all. And it's beautiful. So we're going to do that. In Redwood, when you're working with TypeScript, it is looking for your types to be either in this types directory, like we have in both of these here, or if you know you're going to share types between your front end and your back end, you can put it in a kind of global directory here at the root called types. So just so you know, you have a few different organization options, but we're going to keep it just at the web level for now. So let's take a look at one of the pages here. Let's take a look at the notes page. Again, Redwood generated all of this for us. Isn't that kind of crazy? But we have this notes page. It has this notes cell, which is up here in our components. And this is where the logic happens. So what we're doing here is querying our GraphQL server for our notes. And if there are some, we show the table. And if there aren't any, then we let them make a new note. So with this being said, let's take a look at our notes themselves. And this is where we're going to start adding in some types. All right, so what we have here are our GraphQL mutations. This is one to delete a note. We have some little formatting things going on here. Again, it's kind of cool that Redwood generated all of this for us, even though we might not need it all. It even handles time. That's just nice. But I digress. So in this case, let's just start adding in some TypeScript. So we know that our ID is definitely going to be a number. We can go ahead and add that type there. Isn't TypeScript fun already? Then let's take a look at where our notes come in. So in this case, it looks like this is coming in from our cell. So we should probably put the notes type here. But looks like we don't have to, because you know why? Redwood already did it. So with this in place, we know the type of notes. That, I don't know, that just makes me happy. Like, when you use the Redwood commands in the console to generate a lot of the files for you, it automatically adds so much stuff. That's why we already have the type on our notes. That's why these pages were already here. That's why these components are here. It's just so nice to have it already done. So this is where notes come in, and it's not typed in here. So we can go ahead and add a type for notes. Let me put that in the right place. So that'll be here. Notes. And what we'll do is come up here. Let's say notes props. No, yeah, notes props. Why not? So right above this, we'll go ahead and declare what our notes props are. And actually, let's make this an interface. Oh. So I got that here. This is gonna have an ID. that's a number. We'll have a title that's a string, and we'll have some content that's also a string. So let's see. Oh, since, can I put that in here? No, let's not do that. So since this type is on this object, we'll actually go ahead and add a nested thing in here. And we'll do notes and format that, and now everything is happy. So we know that when we're working with our notes, we'll be able to see the data that is actually stored in each note. So this is how you start going through and adding TypeScript to any project that you're working with, whether it's in Redwood, React, Vue, Angular, plain JavaScript. Wherever you want to add types, which I'm an advocate for, not a stickler, but they're really good to have so that you know exactly what you're working with and you aren't surprised if the back end changes and you don't know what the new types are. You'll get that error pretty quickly, and that way you can go ahead and make those updates. So to me, having TypeScript in an application just makes it more maintainable, as long as you don't go crazy with adding types, because then you need to update those and it can get messy. But as long as you go in with kind of a rough idea or a strategy around how you want to make types, if you want to share types across different components, which is a great idea, or if you want to even share types across the front end and back end, it's also a great idea. But we've added one set of types. So let's look at our form and see what we have here. So we have a note form. It's getting some random props that we aren't 100% sure about. So it's probably a good place to define that, right? So we have this note form. So let's call this interface note form props. And let's actually see what all our props are doing. Looks like we have some prop for an on save method. So that'll look something like this. And we'll find out if that returns anything, but I don't think it does. So we also have a note on our prop, and it looks like it will have all of the note properties. So we have our title, our content. I'm pretty sure ID might be in there somewhere. Yeah, ID should be in there because we use it to save. So we'll go ahead and flesh out this note, which will have a title that's a string, and then this content that's a string. And now I want to point something out. So you'll notice that we have the same types here and back here in our note component. We can do something with that, because actually what we're getting here is an array of these notes. So that is important to note. That's important to pay attention to, is that this is for notes. So this object inside is for a singular note. And since we do have multiple types of the same kind, it's probably best to just move this into the types folder here. And we're so creative, we're going to call this notes. So we have our notes type, and I'm going to go ahead and actually copy and paste this. So over here, we'll make a new interface called note, and I'll just paste in this part. So now we have this new interface. Should probably export it. And yeah, I think that should be it for now. So let's try to import this. To do that, let's take advantage of some shortcuts. So we already know this is going to be a type of note. And the way we're going to add this to the project is maybe cheating, maybe shortcut. It's whatever you want to call it. But we'll import this from TypeScript. So I don't think that's where I want it. Oh, wait a second. These are just some types that we already have because of GraphQL. So yeah, why not use these? We don't even need this. So I'm gonna get rid of that notes type and just use what we already have that was generated. So if I come down here and there you go. There's notes right here. So yeah, made it even easier. If I take a look at notes now, you'll see we have our notes props. You'll see this has the exact content we expect. And I'll go ahead and save that, close out the GraphQL type, and actually go ahead and import that here too. And you'll see that was added up here. So now we have our types defined in a dry way because we never really want to repeat anything because it just adds more for us to maintain. So with this in place, we can get to the point of what all of that was and add these props. So here, let's see, expects 2 arguments. What is data? Oh, gotta define those params. All right, so this is something that's just good. It's like, I practice Kung Fu, and sometimes if we're a little bit off, our Sifu will come and kind of like get on to us about the details. This is how we make ourselves better developers, by using types, because it makes us focus on those details where we have to be like, oh, I guess I do need this property, or I do need this method. It makes you double check what you actually need. So let me add this for my error, which is going to be a string. Let's see if there's any other type issues. Oh, let me add loading, which will be a Boolean. Okay, we have a fully defined form here. It has error handling, validation. We have our types. So if I take a look at this, we know that content should definitely be a string. We know that this loading prop should definitely be a Boolean. And this just helps us with those sanity checks to make sure that we aren't doing something unexpected, to make sure that if there are changes coming in from the data, we can actually figure out what's happening pretty quickly, instead of, you know, there being a fire on production and everybody's wondering, well, the front end code works, but it's returning blah, 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 and the back end code works, but blah. Now you know exactly where the issues are. That is the point of TypeScript, to help you prevent those things before they happen. So let's add some types to maybe one more component, just to make sure that we're driving home what this is. And hopefully this seems pretty straightforward, because what we're doing to keep things pretty simple, we're just taking everything that we defined in our model and making sure that we handle it appropriately on the front end and the back end. So there shouldn't be too many surprises in the types you expect. There shouldn't be too many, well, hopefully not too many updates. But if there are, you already know where you need to make those specific updates in the entire code base, because you're already using types. So let's go ahead and add something to our edit user. So maybe our user form. Let's go ahead and add types to this. So this is going to be pretty much the exact same thing as the notes, except we'll have a few more fields because user has a few more. So we'll call this user form props, and make sure you keep your names pretty like self-explanatory, just so there's clearer association between where types belong, like which components they should be used on, what type of data they'll be working with. When you have your business model defined, it makes defining the types for everything else a lot easier. So we know we have this form. We already know we have the onSave method, and it takes two parameters, the data and the user ID. And it doesn't return anything. Then what else do we have on our props? We have the error, which we definitely know is a string. And to make it easier to see, maybe, I'm gonna go ahead and add this type to our props. And that'll point out exactly what we're missing, which is really helpful. So we'll add our user, which will be a type of user. We'll pull in from the GraphQL types. And you see it added that import there for us. And is there anything else we're missing? This loading. So don't forget the loading field either. Okay. So this is really how you go about adding TypeScript to an existing project, or even if you're starting with a project that has TypeScript enabled, maybe you'll still need to add some types manually. So let's take a look in my terminal here. It looks like all of the types updated correctly, which is always a nice feeling. So let's take a look in the browser to see if we broke anything, because once you have TypeScript enabled, if there are any weird type issues, your app will not run until you fix that. And that's a good thing. That's what we want. It's like an extra test to make sure that we are getting the data we expect. So let's say we add a new user. I like Kalani. At test.com, and we'll give her a note. Let's not do that. I remember what happens when I do this before there's a note there. So if you didn't notice, we have these routes set up too that we didn't do anything for. They just work. It's a nice thing about Redwood. So Redwood is pretty awesome. And we'll say it's true. So I'm gonna save this. And of course we have our new note. So let's go add our new user. And again, it'll be Kalani, because I like her as a singer. So yeah, why not? We'll give her note too. And now we have another thing in our database. We have everything typed. Let's check the console just to see if there's anything else we might be missing. So if we look at that, nope, nothing in the console for us. We're good to go. So I hope that you got to kind of understand how TypeScript works, how you would debug an app, and things like that. Hopefully seeing me fumble a few times made this more realistic because live demos do not go perfectly, the vast majority of the time. So thanks for hanging in here with me. I hope you see why TypeScript is so useful, because even as we were adding types to this particular component, it showed us what we were missing, and then if there were certain fields that we needed to add, we would see that pretty clearly because we would get a TypeScript error. So if you have any questions about this, or you want to reach out to me about anything JavaScript related or machine learning or just tech in general, feel free to contact me on Twitter at flippedcoding. But I hope that this was at least kind of entertaining and hopefully useful to you and something that you can take back and share with people. So thanks for watching.